Did you ever watch wrestling?
There was a brief period when I was like 7 or 8 when I watched it a little bit, but I don't know. I wasn't that into it.
Yeah, it's funny. I was never into it, but I feel like a lot of comedians are into it, which is,
right.
I mean, and then
I feel like the circusy nature of it is kind of appealing, like the spectacle. It's kind of insane.
Yeah, it is. I just never understood it, but yeah, I guess,
it's just really silly. It's like a play. It's like a really weird play.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, it's fine.
It's a play for people. It's theater for people who like to say, like, we drink Bud Light, damn it.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah, it is theater. That's a good point. Yeah, because I mean, it's scripted too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
It's like it's a very strange form of theater, I think.
Yeah. I didn't even really have that many friends that were into it. I had one or two that would watch it, but that's the other thing is, so it was never really that big of a cultural phenomenon on the local sense. But anyway, it doesn't matter. Who cares? How you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. I didn't quite make it all the way through because I spent a lot of time on the introduction because I think it's actually important, and I think if you read it, we can focus a lot on that too. I got about halfway through chapter 1. But.
Okay, so we're doing Democracy, the God That Failed by Hans-Hermann Hoppe.
And I just want to say, I appreciate how easy his writing is to understand.
Yes, I was actually thinking the same thing.
He's got a lot of information, but it's very clear what he's saying.
Exactly. I completely agree. And I was actually thinking exactly the same thing, especially coming off of Marcuse, where it's like you almost feel like he's trying to be confusing so that nobody understands him. Right. It's like it's clear when people like him write, Hoppe, that you can write clearly and cogently about complicated things.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I used to talk about it with my composition professor, Stephen Dembski, in undergrad, because he had this whole thing where he was trying to get us all to be good writers, and so he would just assign us things like write a sentence that makes sense. Just start it very basic, and then when you're writing a paper, just make a statement and make it make sense, and don't worry about complicating it. Just say very plain, simple things to start.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that's exactly it. And I mean, a lot of what they teach us with scientific writing is, take out the adjectives.
Sure. Right.
If you want to be really clear, it's like you can cut out a lot of the. I don't want to call adjectives junk because it's like it is true though that like it does enrich our speech, but you can easily overdo it. This is especially true if you ever like have to read essays for, I guess, any academic sort of degree, but like medical school and stuff. It's just, everybody's always being so. Well, there's an emphasis on narrative writing that kind of pisses me off right now.
Interesting.
and a lot of narrative writing has a lot of adjectives. So
is that coming out of the humanities or the social science push?
Probably. Because it's like they want you to open up with like, my heart was racing, and then I realized, like, blah, blah, blah. It's like they want it to be like a fictional story.
Paper?
Well, it's not in the medical paper, no, in the personal statements for applications to medical school, that kind of stuff.
Heart was racing. What's that? You should always have a twist ending, too. Really.
Yeah. No, I mean, those are...
Where they're not wrong is I think that if there's a story that you're telling that the reader can follow, it's going to be more interesting than a series of facts.
See, I disagree. This is where I am like, maybe I am just a weirdo, though. So I'm willing to admit that. Yeah, because I'm like, just the facts,
I need to
man.
turn my fan off. Hang on, sorry. I just realized it was on.
Oh, I can't hear it, but yeah. Anyway, I mean, we don't have to go too into this. We haven't talked about Hoppe, and there's a lot to talk about with him.
But I feel like okay, yeah. Let's not go into
No. It's fine. Well, okay. Sorry. So a few bird's eye thoughts before we get into the details of everything. One, I'm actually going to kind of reserve a lot of my complete judgments about his theories before I think actually he brought up a lot of interesting points that I don't completely agree with, and it's not exactly my understanding of history, but I'm also willing to appreciate that, you know, I don't know all the authors that he cited. There was one book in particular he kept citing about, you know, when he was making a lot of the points. I guess you probably didn't get to it, but it was at the end of chapter 1 about, you know, how democratic republics are actually more warmongering than monarchies. And he was quoting this one Italian, or he had an Italian name at least, an Italian writer, I assume, that, anyway, I won't go into it. We'll get into it, you know, in more detail. But the point is, I'm probably going to reserve a lot of judgments right now because it was just making me realize I do need to just read more history about the 18th century and see. He's painting this picture that, like, it was a lot less barbaric when monarchies were reigning than when democratic republics were reigning, and it's just like I understand. I'm been grown up in a propagandized world that's very pro democracy, but I'm also not completely naive to these arguments. And also, it was also making me realize, oh, this is where Curtis Yarvin gets all his arguments.
Sure, right. Well, because he makes a point in the introduction that the wars of the 20th century had the most civilian casualties.
Yes.
Yes. I mean, I don't know if he says ever, but
right. And see, that kind of stuff I feel like is, first off, there's just a lot of issues that you have to tease it, and I'm sure that he would appreciate this because he's obviously a very analytical person. Right. You know, he had a graph in here. You know. But it's like you got to kind of talk about proportion. Obviously, there's more people alive now than there were in the 18th century. And then you also got to talk about what has been lost in history. Because, I mean, from what my understanding is, reading like Gibbons, I should say listening to Gibbons, I apologize. I didn't even listen to the whole thing. But Gibbons, he was an 18th century writer in England, 1776, published The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, which is like one of the most famous histories of the Roman Empire, I would say. But it's not without its controversy, of course, because he basically pins, I would say, Christianity on as a big reason for its fall. You know, he describes plenty of massacres of the Germanic people, etc., you know, Persian people, like, you know, all the wars that Rome was doing, although I guess he would say, well, they were a republic. But even before they were a republic, you know, it's like...
I think that it's generally, my understanding is it's pretty undisputed amongst historians of any political persuasion that World War II was maybe the most destructive war ever.
Well, and then I wonder about some of the wars in Asia, you know, because I know that there were wars that, like,
but World War II involved Asia.
No. I'm talking about yes, you're right, but I'm talking about ancient China.
Right.
And
I mean, because just the 2 bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki is hundreds of thousands of people.
Right. Which is why I, again, started by saying proportion is important. There's more people living in the 20th century than any other time. So more people are going to automatically get killed in any conflict. I'm not trying to say that World War I and II weren't horrendous acts of inhumanity, you know. So let me just make that very clear.
Right.
But I'm just saying that... you know, I just am pushing back a little bit to this rosy picture of monarchy that he was painting, and so I guess maybe we should get into it because I keep saying, but we won't get into it.
Yeah, I mean, I think my understanding of his position is that monarchy is brutal and is bad.
Yes, and
however,
that's a great point. That
proportionally, it is less brutal than democracy.
Right.
I think that's his basic thesis.
Yes, exactly.
Monarchy bad, democracy worse.
Yes, I think that's a very good way of summing it up, and he sums it up basically that way in the end of his introduction, I think, very well.
Right.
And he also says that, you know, he's basically, what was he called, an organized anarchist, I think is how he termed himself. I'm trying to find the quote.
There's a list he gives of different ways of describing his position.
Yes. Okay. Yes. Here it is on page. I guess it's 21.
Yeah. XXI. Yep.
XXI. Yeah. So in the introduction, moreover, the same social theory demonstrates positively the possibility of an alternative social order free of economic and ethical shortcomings of monarchy and democracy, as well as any other form of state. The term adopted here for a social system free of monopoly and taxation is, quote, natural order. Other names used elsewhere or by others to refer to the same thing include, quote, ordered anarchy, private property, anarchism, anarcho-capitalism, auto-government, private law society, and pure capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, yeah, how would you summarize the first two, I guess, chapters, including the introduction?
I mean, I would say, so the broad summary is what I just said, and I think the introduction, he's laying out the basis for how you come to understand this theory. Because it's funny, I was thinking that he is actually doing something similar to Sam Harris. You know how Sam Harris has the moral landscape idea that there is such a thing as objective good and objective bad, and it can be, you can create a system where you can determine whether a society is morally superior to another or something like that. And I feel like what Hoppe is doing is he's constructing a system where you can judge a society in terms of, what you want, better or worse, more brutal, less brutal. And he talks about how he is not in line with the empiricist positivists, because he's relying on a rationally constructed system where there are a priori truths that aren't actually able to be argued against. So I think his idea is actually coming out of, like mathematics is a good example of another construction like that, where mathematics operates on a priori truths that are not questionable. They are.
Right.
And then the entire system of math is built on top of that.
Yes.
And so he's constructing a social theory using a similar process, holding the same a priori truth as mathematics, but there's more than just that.
I think that's great. Yeah, like on page XVI, so 16.
16? Yeah.
A priori theory trumps and corrects experience, and logic overrules observation, not vice versa. I actually have here.
Right.
Because obviously I'm an empiricist, right? So,
So what do you think of math? How does math operate for an empiricist? Because math is super rationalistic.
Yeah, well, I think that so here's how I think about it. When I hear him talking about this, I think it's just that we just haven't found the empirical basis for the a priori sort of assumptions, if that makes sense. It's like, so it's like, I agree. So I guess what I'm saying is that I feel like, because what are you saying when you say that there's an a priori theory? You're saying that you take something in good faith in some sense, that this is the way it should be, right?
When I think about it with math, I think of the statement is existence is.
Yes,
like 4 is 4.
Right.
And that is true before math.
But you have to say 4 is 4 for it to be, if that makes sense. So the act of...
Well, I think the theory is that you don't. 4 is 4 whether you say it or not.
But this is where I'm like, you can't really get out of the observer's perspective. So it's hard to... And so the only true way to say anything is based off of sensorial, experience. And this is what I mean, is I think that anybody that talks about a priori... statements just hasn't gone deep enough to find the empirical basis to those statements. That's essentially what I'm saying.
Right. So including mathematicians.
Including mathematicians, yes. Yes.
Because like his example of if A is part of B and if B is part of C, then A is part of C, that is true rationalistically. You don't even have to observe it. And you're saying that you do have to observe it.
How can you say you don't have to observe something out of the frame of observation? By just saying
because
this,
that is true. Because the idea is that would be true with or without humans. It's saying that there is an objective universe that exists outside of humans.
But this is if a tree falls in the wood and nobody's around to hear it, does it make a sound?
And I'm sure that he would say yes.
Yes, and I'm saying
well,
no.
Unless sound is defined as something that a human hears.
Exactly. And this is my point. Everything.
But he wouldn't define it that way.
That's fine. But this is why we disagree, right? I'm saying
so you're more like solipsist, like brain in a vat. The universe is just our imagination.
Not necessarily, because I'm also a materialist, right? So I think,
but the materialist view is much more the. Do you believe in an objective universe, like that the universe is, and it's not just imagined?
No, I see what you're saying.
I'm not saying one is true or not. I'm just asking you.
I think that they're both true. Maybe that's what I'm trying to say. They're both true. Right. I think that the a priori and the empirical observation are the same thing, I guess, because we can't ever break out of the human experience. So maybe I am brain in the vat. Maybe I'm not. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is like that. I didn't read the article you sent me, but the hard problem of consciousness is that, right?
Right. Exactly.
There's no way to prove that isn't true.
Yeah. But you know what? You brought up a very good point about my materialism. It's like, is materialism an a priori, I guess?
Right.
Yeah, I got to think about this more.
I think that whether you can prove the solipsistic perspective or not, I think it isn't actually helpful. It's the problem with Foucault. It's the problem with postmodernism is that at its root it destroys everything. It's oblivion. Mm-hmm. Like, you can never get a plane to fly. You can never get anything. All you can do is destroy.
See, it's interesting.
It's only destructive.
I kind of feel the opposite in that, in some sense, if you work on a priori instances, this is how you can get into tyrannical loops, because it was the empirical revolution that pulled us out of like the Christian a priori thinking, because I would say a lot of Christianity is kind of an a priori system, right? You have a certain set of things that are just accepted.
I mean, I think all human existence is.
Right.
We don't examine and test every last little piece of the world. Most of our existence is acceptance of general rules.
Well, and that's my point. And these general rules are defined by our physiology, I think.
Right. Okay.
I think it's hard. How about that? This is kind of what I'm trying to say. I think it's hard, if not impossible, to tease out where the world begins and we end. Or where the world begins and we start, I guess you could say.
Right.
Because we can't ever experience the world outside of our perspective.
Right. But, so the rationalist perspective, and so this is where I'm curious, forget the examples. It doesn't even matter if the examples he gives are correct. It's, are there things that are true to the universe without us being involved in them?
We could never know, because this is the Heisenberg uncertainty.
It's a belief system. And so what he's claiming is that to say we can never know essentially is a form of like egalitarian communist thinking. Because he says that the push against the empiricist positivist view comes out of democratic socialist style thinking, and it's essentially socialism snuck into social science.
Yeah. See, and this is where I disagree, because maybe I don't disagree. Maybe it did create democracy. I haven't thought about it deeply enough really to think about that. Mm-hmm. Certainly like Locke, one of the preeminent thinkers of empiricism, was, he was into at least constitutional monarchies, right? A sort of republic kind of style with the parliament. But I think what I'm trying to get at is it's kind of a Heisenberg uncertainty principle.
Right.
It's basically
it is when you connect it to Christianity, I don't think you're off base. I think that the religious,
but do you hear what I'm saying with Heisenberg?
Worldviews?
Yeah. Sorry. It's just sorry. Go ahead and finish.
So I think most religious worldviews, the idea of God is an a priori. It absolutely is. Mm-hmm. And so that's, to me, this is, when I start to think about big distinctions, he talks about private government, public government. I think that is a deep distinction that, part of the thing I've been trying to tease out is what is right and left, what is conservative, liberal. I think that there's deep divisions in thinking, and I think that that's one of them. I think that the religious versus the modernist, those aren't the perfect terms, but this idea of, is there an a priori, or is the universe sort of crafted in our minds? That is a deep, deep division in thinking.
Well, and here's the thing. David Hume, I would say, who took Locke and Berkeley's empirical arguments to their logical end, essentially, I think, ended up in the brain in a vat kind of perspective, or at least that you can't ever really know.
Right. You can't know. That's true.
Right.
But you can believe.
But I keep trying to get you to focus on this Heisenberg uncertainty idea. Okay. You know what Heisenberg's principle is, right? Is that the idea that you can't know the momentum and velocity of an electron at the same time, because as soon as you observe
once you've observed it, you've changed it.
You've affected it. And that's kind of how I view what our brains do. And actually, David Chalmers talked about this a little bit. And this is why some people think like quantum could be used to solve the consciousness hard problem. Because there are these sort of similarities between what consciousness is. Well, it's not even similarities. We're talking about an observer having an effect on a physical property. And so that's the point. To me, if you go deep enough, it seems like any time we observe the universe, we're automatically affecting it. So there isn't really anything.
I think it's, do you believe in God? Is the question.
Maybe.
I think that's all it is.
Yeah. Even that, I'd have to think about that because I don't necessarily think that that this other argument is counter to the idea that there's a God.
I think it is. I think there cannot be a God, as in the Christian God, or some version of. There cannot be a God that is transcendent of the universe, that is a priori to everything, if we're brains in a vat.
But there can be a God that is that we're a part of.
Maybe. But if you're saying that a priori isn't, like it's a nonsense idea because experience is everything, then that rules out the idea of a God that transcends everything.
Transcends, yes, but is a part of us, and that's this whole idea that then maybe, I don't know.
I think it renders God meaningless.
See, I don't think so, because I think you can still say that there's something that we're all a part of that we don't understand that's creating this. And
I think that but it renders the creator God meaningless. Because saying there's a part of something that we don't understand, that's the same as anybody's just general belief. We all exist within the universe, and we don't understand the full universe. I mean, I think anybody could accept that proposition.
But it feels like when you say a priori, it means that you've stopped trying to understand it.
It means it's true whether or not we understand it.
Yes. And that's where I think I push back. And that's actually the fundamental thing. I think that we've shown that if with consciousness, we can get a better grasp of our reality.
I feel like this is why maybe you like Marcuse a little bit. I feel like whether or not you agree with Hoppe, he's right in the idea that it comes out of egalitarian style thinking. Mm-hmm. I think it is that. This is where I'm saying that the division is like, can we be masters of our destiny? Can we create heaven on earth? Or is heaven not for us to create?
Yes. Are we a part of God?
And you're a little bit of a heaven on earth guy.
Yeah, a little bit.
Right.
Yeah, I think so.
I think that at least makes sense where you're coming from.
Yeah, no, but I mean, it's an interesting thing. And this also gets to it is like, I think all of philosophy is about just finding a good frame. And then we come back to the perspective. But I did like that this... Again,
sorry.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
You must accept certain things as a priori in order to engage in science, though. Right? Like, if you look at data, you must accept that if you sample something and it happens 4 times, you accept that 4 times is an identity and a quantity that exists outside of your testing system, and so you can use it as an object, objectively.
What do you mean it's outside of the testing system?
The 4-ness is not defined by your test. 4-ness is used as a way of understanding your test.
Yeah, but again, so you're saying I don't... Oh, yeah, yes. I would agree that...
Like, that's how that's how we do anything.
Yes,
how we make a bridge
this is what I'm saying,
we use math.
We're talking about different levels of a priori here, I think. I think that's that's like a pseudo a priori. Whereas, like,
right. That's what I'm saying. You accept it within a domain in order to get something done.
Yes, I thought I said that earlier, though. Yeah, because it's like
maybe you did. I'm not attacking you. I'm trying to state how you. Yeah.
I appreciate that. And basically, because this is what I was saying earlier, where it's like I think an a priori just means that we haven't gone deep enough, but it doesn't mean that we can't go deep enough.
But I think sometimes it's useful, like it's like a logical formulation.
Agree.
That we'll need it sometimes.
Yes, you have to. Yeah, we talk over each other too much. I've noticed that. We were doing that too much last time, so we should try to stop doing that. Yeah. Yes, that's what I was trying to say, though, early, like how we just haven't gone deep enough. But yes, of course, you have to have a basis. You have to establish a founding somewhere. So, yeah. Anyway, we've probably already lost everybody on this.
Right. Okay, so he sets up. He says that there are a priori truths that you can use to determine whether or not a society is, the way you want it to be, or something like that. And he uses some examples, like, let me step back, because actually I have a better way of explaining it. I was kind of like going somewhere, but I think I can do it better. So he says that there's the first step of a historian or a scientist or anybody analyzing anything is to collect data. But that data does not in and of itself carry an interpretation. And that is the difficult problem of being a historian, of being anybody who does any kind of analysis. And so he gives an example of, like taxes have increased and welfare has increased, and so has standard of living. Is that because taxes and welfare have increased? And, there's an argument to be made one way or the other. He has an argument as to why that can't be true. But he says that the difficult problem is the analysis. And he said the way that you get to a proper analysis is you need theory, you need a framework to understand it. And so he says the reason that cannot be true is because taxation cannot create wealth. Taxation can only redistribute wealth. And so if the wealth of a society has gone up over time, it cannot be the result of taxation.
Mm-hmm. Right. That's his basis.
And I think so that's an example, and I think that makes sense as an idea.
Yes. Yeah. No, the idea that you have to have, you establish fundamental a basis in order to make a system, I completely agree with that.
Like, we wouldn't think airplanes fly because flying turtles are holding them up on strings. Like, that has nothing to do with... We wouldn't even entertain that as a thing to check out.
Right. But it doesn't mean that you can't... So this is, again, and this is where I would say the empirical argument would be that is true until it's not true, if that makes sense, from observation. You know, if you end up getting enough data points to show that taxation can create wealth, then you need a new frame. And this is, I guess, where Kuhn would come in, talking about, shifts.
I mean, he does talk about this, about how it's difficult because your a priori assumptions could be wrong.
Exactly.
But if they aren't, you're going to like drive yourself mad trying to test it, because you could test is 4 infinitely, but what does that even mean to be testing like that? That's a wild thing to be testing. I'm not saying there aren't math theories that don't address that in very strange ways, but they are very strange. I'm not even talking about taxation. I'm saying something as simple as 4 is 4, and then we start investigating that and trying to test it in all these different ways. I mean, it's like lunacy in a way, at least according to Hoppe.
Well, but this is the thing: it's like that's how you figure out new things. Is you do something kind of crazy. It's like people are it's like people thought, I'm sure like Newton's idea of gravity was crazy when it first came on the, it's like, how are you thinking about that? But this is exactly what you're saying. Is he noticed that the a priori, or even take a simpler example of, I don't know, Copernicus, right? And there was the a priori assumption given down by the church that the earth was the center of the universe, right? And then he comes in and he's like, actually, hang on, here's all these ways that I've now found that your a priori is wrong, using empirical observation.
Right.
To create then a new frame. And so this is why I'm saying is like, when we talk about a priori, it always feels like we just haven't gone to the deeper level to establish a new frame. And so I agree. I think it's a very interesting philosophical question of whether there is a fundamental substrate to the universe. And I think I agree with you when you said that it's almost unknowable. Mm-hmm. Did you say that? I thought you kind of said that earlier.
Maybe.
Yeah, because and I think it's unknowable because, again, for what I was saying is it's like we can't ever get out of our frame. Uh-huh. So if he's saying, like I actually have written that, it seems like he's saying the a priori theory is the default network of our brains. That's how I would describe it. Because that's, in my opinion, basically what allows us to come up with the 4 equals 4 in math. I actually think that math is an outgrowth of our brain. Mm-hmm. It is a reflection of how we think about the world.
Right.
And so
we
you
are
could
God. God is us.
Well, I mean, it's just whatever you want to use. Like, if you want to use that word, I don't know. I mean, because that's such a big, heavy word.
But I think what you're saying is big and heavy.
Maybe. But... so it's like, there you go. So you say all these things like 4 equals 4. How do you think about it? And then you go in and maybe somebody's going to find how 4 equals 4 from a neurological standpoint, right? Mm-hmm. And then maybe we'll find how the neurons came up with that from a actin standpoint, and we keep going deeper. So I don't know. First off, I think it's a very intriguing point, and I actually agree with, again, a lot of how he's setting everything up. I like the way that he's going about doing this. I will say that.
Right.
It's very systematic, and you know me, I love that. So it's just, I think it's kind of interesting because, again, I feel like whenever... Maybe I just think it's not that useful. Maybe that's it, is this distinction between a priori and empiricism. Because maybe that's what I'm trying to think.
Right. That is what the empiricist would think.
Is it?
I think so. No, I think so. Because from the empiricist perspective, it's all stemming from us. So it doesn't matter whether we think, because it's what our perception is. And for the traditionalist or the religious or whatever, I don't even know how Hoppe would describe himself, but I see this as a deep division. Does the universe stem from me, or am I in the universe?
Yeah, and I think it's porque no los dos.
Right. Right, egalitarianism again.
Well, it's just like I don't know how you could ever know.
Yeah.
And is that an a priori?
That you can't know?
Yeah.
Maybe.
But this is where I'm like, it doesn't mean that you can't try to know. You know what I mean? And this is where, again, going to like, this is what's so great about calculus. It's like you can get somewhere by establishing limits.
Right. Okay, so what do you think about this? This is a note he has. Even a good empiricist would have to admit that, according to his own doctrine, he cannot possibly know a priori whether or not a priori theorems exist and may be used to decide between incompatible explanations of one and the same set of historic data. Hence, he would have to adopt a wait-and-see attitude also.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what I'm saying.
That without a priori principles, you can't interpret anything. You're stuck. Because I think that's true. I think because you have two variables that are moving together, and you do some kind of correlation equation to see what their correlational value is. That is an a priori. That's a whole bunch of a priori systems that you are applying to data.
Yeah, maybe you might be getting me over to your side.
I think you're right. At the deep level, we don't know, but I think we're stuck unless we have some kind of system that we're working with.
Yeah, and so this is where... And maybe this is where I get like squirrely with it. Because it's like, this is why I wrote how I feel like what he's saying is the a priori system. I would look at it as our neural network. Mm-hmm. And our neural network is malleable based off of our environment, as we've kind of discussed already. So all of our, this is why I keep talking about pseudo a prioris. It's like, it's a question of whether there is really a ground truth if our ground truth is always able to change. But I agree with you that there is a pseudo ground truth that we build things off of for a period until we realize, for whatever reason, and often it's an empirical reason, to then change the a priori frame.
Right.
Is that a fair thing?
I think so. I think that's true. I think there's a problem where if something was an a priori truth to the universe, and you spent your time trying to test it to see if it was real or not, like, you're going to drive yourself crazy. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying that everything that we think that's a priori true is true. I'm saying, let's say that there is something that's true. And you trying to spend all of your time disproving something that's actually true is going to drive you crazy.
Well, and trying to prove that truth exists. I mean, this is the thing, is we could get a whole thing about truth. It's like, what does that even mean, right? Again, that's the thing, is truth seems to also be relative to our mental state at the time.
Right,
yeah.
but that's a very different world. That's the thing is like if that's the world we're in, then talking about whether democracy or monarchy are better is meaningless. Talking about like whether morphine, is a painkiller, like actually dulls pain, is a meaningless thing because truth, like if we strip the notion of truth, then we also strip the need to converse or explore, other than like hedonism, which I'm not saying is bad, but then like we do what we want. But saying once we've stripped the notion of truth, then the idea of anything working or anything being a better idea than anything else is out the window.
Well, I think that's kind of, unfortunately, by default true, and this is why.
but this is where I'm saying that Foucault is by definition, it's destructive only. I'm not saying it isn't valuable, but it's dangerous.
Well, and so here's the thing: is your a priori is that destruction is bad, right?
No. I think it can be valuable. There's times to destroy. It's dangerous, is what I'm saying.
Well, so is construction.
In a different way, but yes, for sure.
Right. Yeah, because this is what I was going to say. So getting more into the meat of his argument, right, he talks about this idea of civilization and decivilization. That's kind of, I would say, how he's framing a lot of the things in this intro, and then, of course, he goes into that in the first chapter. And his ultimate thesis is that democracy ultimately, in the long term, will lead to decivilization and barbarism, and then monarchies actually will lead to an increase in civilization. And then he also bases this off of this idea of time preference.
Yes.
And it's the idea that if you have a shorter time preference, then you'll actually be more forward thinking. Right?
Yes.
And if you have a longer time preference, you'll be more present thinking.
And what? Sorry.
And democracy then ultimately causes a larger time preference, and he gives a bunch of examples. That's essentially what the first chapter is about. It's giving all these examples of how democracy leads to a longer time preference because of like the public ownership of the government.
Right.
So people are going to be more present thinking, and you definitely see this. Like a president comes in for 4 years in the U.S. and is not necessarily thinking about the next 20 years. They're thinking about the next 4 years. And then taxes make longer time preference and stuff like that. And so his point is a longer time preference leads to more present thinking. More present thinking leads to decivilization because you're not planning as much for the future.
Right.
And I actually really like this way of thinking because this is exactly kind of how I think about the mind, right? As we've discussed. I put it on a spectrum of whether you're in the present or you're not in the present. And if you're more conscious, then you're more not in the present, and if you're less conscious, you're more in the present, and you're more animalistic. And we've talked about how consciousness, civilization seems to be a outgrowth of consciousness. So I completely agree with what he's saying. Whereas, like, if you're going to be more forward thinking, you're more conscious, then you're going to be building up civilization.
Right.
So all that I just wanted to say I agree with all that. Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah. What do you think about building the theory on the time preference groundwork?
I kind of like that. Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. Is I like that he is thinking about this from essentially, I think, a consciousness perspective.
And do you agree with the premises he lays out with respect to time preference?
Can you remind me what they were?
I mean, the idea is that something good now versus something good later, people will naturally prioritize the good thing now, unless there are other factors that would lead the good from the thing later to outweigh the good from the thing now.
Yes, I agree with that. And I also agree with the fact that in order to even weigh those options, you have to have the ability to project in the future.
Right.
Which is, again, why, like, children, this is why you have to tell children not to do drugs, because they can't even see, right? the future of what the effects of like drinking every day when starting at like age of 10 is going to do to you. Well, because they're not forward thinking enough, right? Because they're not conscious yet. Or they're developing it, but it hasn't blossomed.
Sure.
Did I ask you if you ever had like a moment where you feel like the lights turned on for you?
No. I mean, I think from that perspective, I'm probably still not conscious.
We go back to Antushka, the NPC.
Yeah, right. Exactly. No, I don't think so.
Interesting. Yeah, because I feel like I have a shift in, and so I've talked to other people who it's happened much earlier for them, but I feel like I had a lot of, maybe you've just by default always been conscious too. This could be.
Yeah, but it's true. But I'm also like hedonistic. I do things today that will come and bite me in the ass later, and I still do them even knowing that.
Sure. But so do I. I mean, we all do that. I think that's the point. Is I think we fluctuate throughout our lifetime in different levels of consciousness.
Right.
But anyway, yeah. So I do. Yeah. For me, I feel like it was around 15. Around 15 is when there was a shift in thinking.
Right.
That occurred. Maybe 14, 15.
Right. I also spent all my life trying to escape consciousness. I think, like, we've talked about it before, but I think playing music is a very, like, the flow state or whatever is a non-conscious situation.
Yeah, no, I agree. And actually, that's one of the reasons I feel like I have such bad performance anxiety is because I have a hard time escaping consciousness.
Right, yep.
Because I'm always thinking about what are these people thinking about when I'm playing to them.
Yeah, that sounds like some Buddhist suffering right there.
Well, yeah, and that's why. And we've talked about this too. How I think the Eastern religions focus on leaning away from consciousness more into the present, and then we in the West have leaned into consciousness through things like the confessional.
Sure.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, no, but you've given me a lot to think about with the a priori thing. Maybe I do believe in a priori. I guess here's what I didn't like is that he was trying to paint it as if empiricists don't have a priority. Maybe that's my issue. Because I feel like actually, maybe let me recalibrate my argument because I think you're absolutely right. From the I actually agree with what he's saying. I think you have to have a basis some point, right? As I've already said. It's just whether or not that basis is as deep as it should be.
Right.
But I think empiricists have a basis, and the basis is the sensations.
Sure.
The a priori, and Kant kind of talks about this. Yeah. What did he call them? I always forget his term. He had a word for basically the things that we can't know without, like the things that we take for granted.
Right.
It's like transcend. Oh, by the way, our listenership has been good.
Oh, nice.
Well, good for us, It's good as relative.
Yeah,
right?
Bad for them.
Bad for them. Yeah, and then I was saying, or at least it seems people have been going through the older episodes. And then I said, God only knows what they're thinking.
Yeah.
Synthetic a priori judgments.
Synthetic a priori. That's an interesting term.
Yeah. Which I actually think I kind of agree with. Although, again, it's like, as is probably clear from us discussing this, it's like I find a lot of these concepts hard to wrap my head around because in some ways I don't think they matter. In some ways they do. It's metaphysics. I thought this was a good thing. It's metaphysics' main concern is not at all merely to analyze concepts which we form a priori of things and thus to elucidate them analytically, but to expand our knowledge a priori. And that's, I think, exactly what I was saying. It's like I think what we define as a priori is constantly changing. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's where I have an issue with like thinking that there's static a prioris. Maybe there is.
I think there are because of how we operate.
I don't know, because then you have all these other systems of math that can come in. But I don't know.
I mean, I think we operate in the world with static a prioris. Like, I believe in existence, and I don't test that ever. Nor do I have a way of testing it.
Yeah, but again, I think it's the expansion is I don't know. I think we're going to go over the old stuff that we've already discussed. But yeah, he says claims 1, all mathematical judgments are synthetic a priori. 2, natural science, physics contains synthetic a priori judgments as principles. And 3, metaphysics consists entirely of synthetic a priori propositions.
Nice.
Kant's central problem with pure reason: how are synthetic judgments a priori possible? Yeah.
Who is this? Is Hume or this is Kant?
No, this is Kant. Kant.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the whole Austrian school is not into Kant.
Yeah, no, and Nietzsche hated Kant too.
Right.
But in there, he kind of sounds like he's agreeing with them. He's saying that they exist, but I guess that he's saying they're synthetic too.
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, okay, sorry. We'll have to read his critique of pure reason. That'll be a real snore fest.
maybe it will, maybe it won't.
It will. You will hate it.
Well, maybe that's good. Is that a snore thing?
Well, I think you won't find it very riveting. I think you'll probably, I don't know, maybe we could try. It's really long as part of the issue.
Yeah.
He wrote an abbreviated version though.
Nice.
Cuz nobody read his first version because it was so long.
There's a lot of
He's like, all right, I'll sum it up.
TLDR.
Exactly. He did a TLDR, exactly.
Yeah. So you like the idea of basing it on time preference. And then he goes on to talk about crime with time preference and how as your future orientation shortens, that will increase crime within a society. Increase not just crime, like vices, just like hedonism, things like that. And then what government is able to do is it's able to draw on all of that and legitimize it. An interesting point he made, which actually goes back to a conversation we were having as the last episode or the episode before about small communities, because I was talking about that podcast I was listening to about the guy living in Palestine. And I think you were guessing that probably a small village in Palestine would be democratic in some way.
Oh, yes, of course. And here he's saying monarchical, right?
Yeah, he's saying that the natural order of things in a small society that doesn't yet have a government will be something monarchical, where somebody will assert power or authority, and those around them will tend to agree or fight it in some way. But so there'll be like a power battle, or people will agree to the authority of somebody.
Yes.
So what do you think about that? Because for me, that feels like, if I'm not talking about a town or anything, I'm just talking about my experience in life, that seems pretty common. Most situations I'm in, we're not voting. It's like somebody asserts authority over something. Even they're like, I want sushi tonight. And then everybody goes, okay.
Well, see, that's where I think I disagree. And maybe it's what size of group are we talking about? Because I think you're right that generally there will be one person that kind of takes a lead in a group, but not always. And often, even if one person takes a lead, it's sort of like they are asking what other people want for dinner, for instance. It's like,
well, the monarch does have to have the assent of the people.
Right, exactly. Yes. And
but that doesn't mean it's a democracy.
Yeah.
Here, as a band leader, like when I'm leading my band, the people, they have to agree to follow my lead.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that we voted on it. It's not a democracy.
Well,
they don't have power or say. They don't have suffrage in this example.
Well, in the case of where you've hired people because it's the Anthony
or even if I haven't, even if they've agreed to come for no pay.
Hang on. if it's a band like I had in high school where it was just 3 friends playing, it was absolutely a democracy. It was like if even though like in some cases I kind of felt like I was the band leader, I all the decisions were still made from a consensus.
I think that it happens. There are democratic music groups, bands out there. They don't usually go anywhere.
Right. Well, hey, what are you trying to say about our band?
Yeah, maybe in high school your band went far. I'm not even saying my band hasn't gone far either. But most famous bands we know of, there's a vibe that they're all buddies and stuff. But I was just listening to a thing about Led Zeppelin. Like, that was just Jimmy Page's band.
Well, how about this?
They weren't friends. They didn't hang out. It was just Jimmy Page was like, I need you guys to do this.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Right. But then you have Cream, which was a supergroup. You know, I doubt you would say like Eric Clapton was the lead of Cream.
But Cream was not a democracy. They weren't voting on anything.
How do you know?
I don't know that. Okay, it's true. I don't know. My guess is it wasn't a democracy.
I don't know. All I'm saying is that I think that first off, I think I will meet you. I'll try to meet you halfway and say that I think kind of where I'm coming at. Because I do see the logic behind, like, yeah, you can definitely see small groups where it'll take on a monarchical look. But I think you also see small groups that are democratic. And I think this is maybe the point, is that it's probably, you find all of these in nature. Sure. Just like in the animal kingdom. It's like, yes, you have bees, which obviously are monarchical to a sense. But then you also have, like, fish that will swim in a school with seemingly no organization, but they're all going the same way. Is there one kingfish that's determining that? Or is it just, it's some kind of weird democratic conglomeration of what all the fish are feeling? You know what I mean? It's like, I think you can find examples in nature of monarchies, of democratic republics, of all of these things. Yeah.
I guess I have a harder time thinking of like anarchic social situations. And when I'm saying anarchic, I'm talking about things not related to the government. I'm not talking about like the full deep implication of non-organization or whatever. I just mean non-government directed, non-state associated interactions. I can't think of many that are democratic. I can think of somewhere like the people involved are very like intentionally making it democratic. But I can't think of any like spontaneous democracy that pops up. Maybe I'm wrong. If you can think of something, but
spontaneous. Well, I mean Greece, right? Athens.
No. I don't mean societies. I mean like a bar is owned by somebody and hires people. Or a group of friends, they hang out. Somebody is usually leading let's have a party this weekend. Let's go out to dinner. It's not usually democratic.
What about It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia? There's a group of people who own a bar, right?
Right.
Sure, Dennis would say
they're all trying to like
leader.
vie for tyrant status there, though.
Right, exactly. But ultimately,
there's no voting.
Yeah, well, but there is there's a difference between explicit and implicit voting too, right? You know,
right?
It's like just because you're not explicitly saying I feel this way, often you have a group come together and everybody's probing how the other people feel. You know,
right?
And this is where again with your dinner example, I could think of plenty examples of times that I've gone out to dinner with people, and it's like somebody says, hey, I feel like going here. How does everybody else feel like that? And then somebody else will be like, oh, I don't really want to do that. And then you come up with a, compromise, right?
Right.
So, yeah. So there are, I guess, 2 examples.
Sure.
So, and which brings me back to my point of like, I will meet you halfway and say, yeah, I don't think democracy is necessarily the default form of government for us, because I think you can find examples of where monarchy or monarchistic sort of societies come out. But I think you also do find examples of where democratic systems come out. Yeah. And it's interesting because it's like, again, in some sense, the anarcho-capitalist is kind of, I don't know, they're a democracy in of themselves, I suppose.
What do you mean?
Well, there's a consensus that's formed within their body.
Have you ever listened to anarcho-capitalists? I mean, this is the thing. Is like even libertarians, they can't agree on anything.
Within their body, not the bigger body. I'm saying we all come to consensus within ourselves. Like we're all kind of democratic in that we're weighing everything that comes in. I know this is very amorphous.
This is a little bit like you're a monopoly of you.
Yes, you are though. It's just a scale.
Okay, but hang on a second. So, monopoly, even Hoppe defines it. Monopoly has to do with exchange. Monopoly, the word, has nothing to do with you.
Okay, well, this is where I disagree. And so, sure, he can build a system.
I mean the etymology of the word. Like the word monopoly is like one system controlling exchange. It has to do with markets.
In the way that many people use it, sure, but I'm talking about consolidation. Fine. You don't want me to use the word monopoly? Fine. That's fine. I can use a different word.
You can say you are you, and that. Sure.
You're one thing that's controlling many things. There's a consensus that's built of you, you know?
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry.
I don't know. Okay. I don't get it.
We don't have to go down that road.
Yeah. Anyway, so you think that monopoly or that democracies naturally occur?
I think that there are examples of where democracies naturally occur.
Right.
Yeah.
And Hoppe's arguing that that's very rare, and basically they tend to occur through war or revolution of a monarchic system. Like a mutiny, it tends to be the way that a democracy happens.
Yeah, I mean, I think that often, well, we've kind of talked about this before, that there does seem to be an interesting progression of cycles of governments where it's like you'll have, but actually it feels more like an oligarchy. We talked about this earlier, and now I can't even remember. But there's like some people who think it's like, is it the monarchies knocked out by democracy, and then democracies knocked out by the oligarchy, and then the oligarchies knocked out by the monarchy? Somebody has said that's like a cycle,
sure,
right?
Yeah.
So it's like, sure, I agree with that there can be cycles to these things, and maybe.
Well, I don't think he's saying there's cycles to them either, because he says democratic rule.
Directionality. How about that? That's what I mean.
Right. Yeah. That democracies come out of monarchies and are like destructive to society, essentially.
Right.
Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm okay. I just knocked over. I got it's coffee, so I didn't want it to spill on the carpet.
You're all jittery.
I am very jittery. Yeah. This is this is one of those episodes I feel like I'm going to listen back to and be like, God, I was so naive.
I don't know. I mean, maybe not. Maybe you think I'm because I feel like you listen back to our anarchy episodes, and I feel like you think I'm naive.
I don't think you're naive. Well, I mean, I think we're all naive. We're all naive in certain settings, right?
Yeah.
I think that's the case. I think, I mean, we don't have to rehash all that. But no, I mean, more of it is like, yeah, I mean, part of it is just I need to think about all these things more deeply. I think that's what I will definitely say that I'll go on record and say that this is me. I mean, this whole podcast is me trying to start to think about some of these things more deeply.
Sure.
I don't know if you feel that way about yourself too, but
yeah, I mean,
always. Yeah.
I mean, every week it's like even stuff that I've read about before. It's.
Mm-hmm.
You can always go deeper. You can always eschew the old a priori.
Exact. I'm glad you said that because I was going to say that.
Yeah.
You read my mind, Antushka.
Nice.
Yeah. So you want to get to some of the things I really disagree. Well, not disagree, but have a big questions about. Although it's towards the end. So I mean, if there's other stuff. I mean, there is other stuff we should talk about.
Yeah, I mean, so the big distinction that I like, and I think we might have talked about it before, I don't remember, because every time I read Hoppe, I go, oh yeah, I like that distinction, is when he talks about private ownership of government versus public ownership of government.
Right.
And I think it's a way that it makes it very understandable
I agree.
What the implications of democracy versus monarchy are.
Right. And by the way, it's interesting. I actually kind of, at least I follow his logic for a lot of his points about democracy versus monarchy. So I hope that's coming across in this. Because, I mean, especially the idea that because the rulers are only... a lot of what it came back to is that, a monarchy, at least the ruler there's accountability, right? That was a big distinction, he said, because it's like, the monarchist is going to, if they want to take out a loan, that loan is on them and their descendants, So then he was making the point that you would be less likely to incur debt, whereas, if you're a president that's in there for 4 years, it's like you don't really care because it's like it's not your problem at the end of it.
Right.
So but there were some assumptions that I felt like were under all these that I think is worth reconciling or at least bringing them to the front.
Sure.
One, the assumption that civilization's good, right? That's an assumption, right?
I agree.
You want to go towards civilization.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a good thing to point out.
And sort of on this note, that is same kind of thinking is that future-oriented thinking is good also. Is that
right? Well, he says that he is a proud conservative, essentially.
And they're future-oriented. I guess which I would agree, but is that you're saying those are the same thing?
Yeah, I mean, what you're saying to me feels like, like a revolutionary is trying to destroy,
But they have a vision of the future.
Yeah, they have a vision, but then I think, like a Buddhist idea or something, maybe civilization isn't so good because civilization traps you in suffering.
Right.
Like consciousness traps you in suffering.
Exactly. And that's exactly where I was going with all this, is that there's a lot of people who think staying more present-minded, as I've discussed with, I think how Buddhists feel, is actually the way to living a better and happy life. Because
and this is in clear opposition to that, for sure.
Exactly. So I obviously also kind of agree with him that I think leaning into consciousness and civilization is the best way. But I think it's worth acknowledging that there are a lot of people in our civilization who don't feel that way. Maybe they don't even realize they don't feel that way. And then there's also the question of, I think we'll just leave it there. Yeah, I think that's a good place to leave it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I see that as a do you believe in God, do you not also? Because there's the idea that Buddhism is a religion of non-religion.
Right.
And how there are even Buddhist sects that don't believe in God at all. And then there are some Buddhist sects that believe that there are gods, but they're pathetic. Like a god is a pathetic thing. Mm-hmm. And so that to me, that's like, it's almost like optimism versus nihilism or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like throwing off your consciousness to live as an animal, or as the Buddhist idea is even further than that. Not even an animal, like non-existence.
Mm-hmm.
Oblivion is nirvana, right?
Right. Yes.
That's like that. That's what I'm saying. Like Foucault, all the way down is oblivion. It's not like nihilism is oblivion. It's non-existence. Versus Christianity is eternal life.
Well, nihilism is weariness of man, as Nietzsche has defined it.
Sure.
Whatever that means.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm seeing one as optimism, eternal life, and one as like pure pessimism.
Mm-hmm.
White pill, black pill, kind of.
Right. And that's kind of the thing is, in some sense, though, I actually think that the sort of heaven on earth perspective is a more optimistic one because it gives you more ability to change your lot in life.
Right. Well,
whereas
I would say that Marcuse is considerably more optimistic than Foucault.
Yes.
At least Marcuse is trying to do something. Yes, even though it's a crazy thing to try to do. But
yeah, no, it's true. Yeah. Foucault doesn't really lay out much of a plan, at least in what we've read.
He's just smoking like shit.
That's very true. I mean, but I guess what I'm saying, though, is that it almost feels like accepting that there's a priori that you can't understand feels kind of pessimistic to me.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. But I thought you were also saying that that's optimistic because accepting that there's a priori you can't understand is accepting God.
I think it depends on how you're doing it and why you're doing it. I think you're right. I think there's a degree to which you have to accept that you will never understand infinity. But, the scientific project is trying, maybe.
Right.
Unless, it depends, because what Nietzsche says is not trying, it's actually trying to, destroy infinity.
Yeah, it's trying to discretize infinity.
So I don't know. I think I have to run because I have a gig, but...
bummer. Damn. Oh, we didn't get to... How long have we been going?
A little over an hour.
Okay.
But I have a gig at 8, so...
Okay, dang. Because I wanted to get into all my issues about war. We didn't get into any of that.
I mean, we could do a part 2 tomorrow if you wanted.
Yeah, or, you get off pretty late, I imagine.
Yeah, I'll be home midnight.
Okay.
I probably don't want to do one tonight.
Yeah, no, it's okay.
I will, but if you want, we could do a part 2 tomorrow and pick it up.
Yeah, maybe let's do that because there's still a bit to talk about, and I think the war stuff was actually what
we could just release prepared. 2 this week. We could do, release this,
do that.
Pick it up tomorrow, and then release a second part.
Let's do that. Yeah.
All right. Sounds good.
Okay.
All right.
Well, all right.
But,
have a good
I have to run. All right. Sorry. All right. Bye, everybody.
See ya.
Yeah.